They laughed when she walked in wearing scrubs. 3 hours later, those same men were silent, watching in disbelief as she outshot a SWAT team with just one bullet. But what she did after the shot? That's what destroyed them. Are you lost, sweetheart? The public range is down the road. That smug voice belonged to Charles Whitmore III, the silver spoon heir of a family that had never served a day in uniform, but wrapped themselves in glory they didn't earn. He stood there at the entrance of Sterling Arms Elite, arms crossed, flanked by his crew of weekend warriors and tacti-cool clowns who played soldier on Saturdays, but had never heard a shot fired in anger. Elena Ramirez didn't flinch. She stood silently in her faded jacket, hospital scrubs visible underneath, her only bag a basic nylon backpack. She looked out of place in that polished high-gloss facility, all clean angles, polished brass, and egos polished even more. But what none of them knew was that Elena had once worn a different uniform, desert camo, boots soaked in dust, with the call sign Phantom Viper stitched across her gear. She had spent years in Afghanistan, taking shots that saved lives, calculating wind drift and distance like poetry. While men like Charles played Call of Duty in air-conditioned basements, she didn't need validation from them. She just needed one chance. And after 3 grueling months of working night shifts, saving every penny, she bought a one-time guest pass to the most exclusive range in the state, just to see if the legends these men built around themselves were even remotely real. What she got instead was mockery. She probably thinks this is bingo night, Ivan Novak snickered, a retired SWAT sniper whose best days were behind him, but whose ego had only grown with time. What's your weapon, sweetheart? A thermometer. The others laughed. The sobby laughter didn't bother Elena. It was familiar, the same tone she'd heard years ago when she was the only woman in her unit. The same laughs that stopped cold after her first mission. But Charles wanted more than laughter. He wanted humiliation. Tell you what, he grinned. You get one shot, just one. 10 moving targets, 3 seconds. You hit them all, I hand. You my $100,000 prize pool. You miss even one. You walk out for good. The others roared with laughter, already celebrating her failure before she even touched a rifle. But Elena looked him square in the eye and simply said, "Where's the line?" The room quieted. Some snickered. A few looked nervous. But Charles, cocky as ever, waved her over to the booth. What they didn't realize was that Elena had been doing this for real, with lives on the line, not trophies. She didn't posture. She didn't flex. She just asked for one thing, the most basic AR platform they had, no optics. The targets began to move, 10 of them, unpredictable patterns, 2.7 seconds of visibility. Charles leaned against the glass like a man waiting to witness a car crash. But Elena wasn't there to crash, she was there to remind them. She inhaled, calculated, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. One shot cracked through the range, echoing like thunder. In the blink of an eye, the bullet danced, slicing the first target, ricocheting off steel dividers, catching the second, third, fourth. The entire room froze as 10 metal silhouettes dropped with surgical precision. Silence. Then chaos. Gasps. Shouts. Phones whipped out. No one had ever done that shot. Not even Ivan. Charles turned pale. Ivan looked like he'd seen a ghost, and Elena? She calmly stepped away from the booth and handed the rifle back. "You owe the Children's Hospital $100,000, she said without flinching. Confused, Charles stammered. "What?" She repeated it louder. "The check will be made in your name. Maybe next time don't mock a nurse." The crowd erupted, not just in applause but in outrage. The video went viral within hours. By nightfall, news stations were playing it on loop. Nurse outshoots SWAT team at elite club. One shot heard around the world. But Elena wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing justice. She stood in front of the cameras the next day and made her real move. This club claims to promote safety and excellence, but they mock veterans, teachers, and working-class Americans who want to learn to defend themselves. If they won't open their doors to the public, I'll build a range across the street that does. That one sentence started a revolution. Investors pulled out of Sterling Arms. Board members turned on Charles. Within days, he was ousted. and in his place stood Colonel Laura Bennett, a real soldier who respected service in all its forms. The club was renamed Liberty Range and opened its doors to veterans, nurses, EMTs, and public servants. For free. Elena went back to work at the hospital. No interviews, no press tour. She said what needed to be said, made her point with one perfect shot, and walked away. But justice had already rippled. And then, 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. Ivan Novak showed up at the ER. No swagger, no smirk, just humility. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "Teach me." Elena didn't say yes. Not right away, but she didn't say no either, because maybe redemption matters too. If this story lit a fire in you, if you've ever been mocked, overlooked, or told you don't belong, then do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell to all so you don't miss what happens next. Because there's more to this story than just one shot. A week later, a mysterious military contractor wired $5 million to an anonymous LLC in Elena's name. And rumor has it, it wasn't just about the bullet. It was about who she hit. But now here's what they didn't know. Not Charles Whitmore III with his manicured arrogance. Not Ivan Novak with his overinflated tales of SWAT missions. Not the crowd of elite gun club members who thought a nurse in scrubs had wandered into their sacred warrior temple by accident. Elena Ramirez wasn't just a nurse pulling double shifts in a trauma ward. She was Phantom Viper, a name whispered across forward operating bases in Afghanistan, a myth among special forces, a ghost who saved lives from impossible distances. Her confirmed kills didn't come from rage or ego, but from icy focus and the responsibility of keeping her brothers and sisters alive. She had walked away from that life after a mission that cost her everything, her team, her peace, and almost her mind. But she carried the precision with her, like a scar beneath the surface. So when she stepped up to that firing line, surrounded by snickering men who only played at war, she wasn't rattled. She was calm, calculating. 10 targets, different heights, unpredictable motions, a tiny 2.7-second window. Not enough for most men to line up one clean shot, let alone 10. But Elena didn't need 10 bullets. She only needed one. She didn't posture or ask questions. She just studied the range like a surgeon reviews anatomy before a cut. She adjusted the rifle's weight, noted the angles of steel partitions, wine vents, temperature, and where sound echoed off the ceiling. Novak chuckled behind her. "Gonna kiss the barrel goodbye, nurse?" Charles leaned in to his guests, whispering something that triggered a ripple of laughter. Elena didn't react. She just inhaled, slow and deep, the way she used to before each mission, and held it as the Rangemaster began the countdown. 3, 2, 1. The world went still. She exhaled, finger tightening just enough to release that single round. Crack. The bullet shot out like a whisper wrapped in thunder, and what happened next couldn't be replicated even in simulation. It hit the first target dead on, then ricocheted, at a perfect angle to slice through the second, curved off a barrier to strike the third, each motion a masterpiece of geometry, physics, and purpose. The final target was tagged at the last fraction of the 2.7-second window. Clean, precise, unforgiving. Then silence. Absolute silence. No cheering, no mockery, just the stunned stillness of men who had never been humbled this completely. Phones slowly rose. Hands covered mouths. Even Novak blinked like he'd seen a ghost. And Charles, his face turned the shade of a man who just watched his entire ego shatter in front of him. Elena slowly turned to him, face calm, voice steady, and said, "That's for thinking this jacket made me weak." She laid the rifle on the bench with more respect than Charles had shown anyone that day and walked toward the exit. But then, the applause started. One man, then another, then the whole room. The video hit social media within the hour, racking up over 10 million views in a single night. News anchors called it the shot heard round the range. Veterans from every state flooded the comments with praise. Phantom Viper started trending before her real name did. But what most people didn't realize was that the shot was just the beginning. See, this wasn't just about pride. This was about who got to belong. about the everyday people who protect this country in ways these elitists never could. Elena used her newfound fame to challenge the club. Open your doors to teachers, medics, veterans, firefighters, anyone willing to learn responsible firearm handling, or I'll build a range across the street that will. And just like that, the empire Charles Whitmore built on exclusion and ego began to crumble. Investors panicked, sponsors pulled out, club members resigned. Within 5 days, Charles was forced to step down, and his shares were bought out by a group of veteran entrepreneurs who appointed Colonel Laura Bennett, Elena's former CO, as the new director. She renamed the facility Liberty Range and rewrote every policy. But here's where it gets interesting. While Charles was busy packing his mahogany office, a federal investigator quietly launched a probe into certain military contracts tied to his family's foundation. Turns out someone in the building had been misusing defense grants for private security training at the club, under fake names. And guess who flagged that first? A hospital nurse named Elena. But it gets deeper, because late one night, a black SUV pulled up outside Elena's apartment. A man in a plain black coat handed her a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside were photos, grainy, high-angle infrared, of a sniper post during her final mission overseas. Ones only. A few people in the world should have had, along with them, a note. We never forgot Phantom Viper, but someone else did. He's back. Elena's hand shook as she stared at the last line. Target ID, Ivan Novak. That's right, the same man who mocked her at the range. May not have been who he claimed to be, and what Elena thought was closure might have just reopened a deadly chapter. If you're still watching, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell to all, because the next part of this story will take a turn no one sees coming. Phantom Viper isn't done yet, and neither is her past. Charles Whitmore III thought he could rewrite the rules, again. As the stunned crowd still murmured about Elena's impossible shot, he puffed up his chest and waved a dismissive hand, trying to claw back control. That wasn't real marksmanship, he barked, his voice cracking just enough to reveal the panic. It was trick shooting, symbolic, not valid. But the room didn't buy it, not this time. Sterling Arms Elite had cameras covering every angle, every ricochet, every target. The evidence was clear. Elena's shot was legal, precise, and the kind of performance none of them could replicate even on their best day. The silence from Novak, the embarrassed glances from board members, and the roaring approval from onlookers made it clear there was no way out. So Elena calmly accepted the $100,000 prize check, but just when they thought the storm had passed, she dropped a thunderbolt that shook the entire range to its foundation. Instead of pocketing the money, she announced she was donating every single penny to a local children's hospital, and not just in her name, but in Charles Whitmore's name. Reporters captured the exact moment his smug smile evaporated, replaced by a stunned, twitching scowl. The headlines wrote themselves. Nurse outshoots SWAT, donates prize in elitist's name. But it wasn't just a move of generosity. It was strategy. Elena looked Charles square in the eye, her voice low and unshakable. You think this place is elite because of velvet ropes and rules, but real warriors don't gatekeep. They teach. They serve. That one sentence sent a ripple through the entire community. Then, without flinching, she issued a challenge that would define everything to come. If Sterling Arms refuses to allow veterans, teachers, and medical staff access to train here, I'll open a range across the street, one that welcomes everyone. It wasn't an empty threat. Elena had credibility now, and reach. By the time the video of her speech hit the internet, it went nuclear. In just 48 hours, clips of the impossible shot racked up over 20 million views. The headlines exploded. Modern-day Annie Oakley humiliates gun club elites. Gun rights groups, veteran communities, EMTs, teachers, and even military brass came out in her support. News outlets from every coast covered her story. Talk radio lit up. And Charles? He was suddenly at the center of a firestorm he couldn't control. Investors began backing Elena's vision. Several offered land, others money. A group of veterans even started drafting blueprints for the inclusive range, to be named Freedom. Meanwhile, the Sterling Arms boardroom turned into a battlefield. Sponsors threatened to pull out. Membership applications tanked. Club alumni began resigning. And the final blow came when a group of shareholders called for an emergency vote to remove Charles Whitmore as CEO. For the first time in his life, he was being outgunned, not by bullets, but by truth, dignity, and public wrath. But Elena didn't stop there. She knew Charles, and men like him wouldn't just fade into the shadows. They'd regroup, rebrand, and retaliate. So she launched a campaign not for herself, but for the people the system overlooked. She held interviews, released statements calling for more inclusive gun education, and spoke openly about her past as Phantom Viper, a title once hidden, now reclaimed. Her story struck a nerve with everyday Americans, especially the working class, men who'd been told they didn't look the part to defend themselves, protect their families, or even just train in peace. She gave them a voice and a place. But while the public loved her, someone else was watching from the shadows. One night, a man in civilian clothes showed up at her hospital's parking lot. Military posture, buzz cut, no insignia. He handed her a phone. No greeting, no smile. Just a video file, grainy footage of a high-security tactical team training at an unknown location, and there, leading the team, was Ivan Novak. Except, this team wore no American flags. The video cut to black, and a voice spoke. He wasn't just mocking you, he was studying you. Elena stared at the phone, her heart sinking. What had started as a fight for inclusion had just revealed a deeper betrayal. It's about uncovering who Novak really is, and what he's planning next. Elena's fight for justice just became a fight for national security. And this time, she won't be aiming at targets. She'll be aiming at traitors. Within just 7 days, the mighty Sterling Arms elite, once a fortress of arrogance and exclusion, began to collapse like a sandcastle hit by a tidal wave. Their sponsors, sensing the PR disaster, fled like rats off a sinking ship. Membership cancellations flooded in, and shareholders held emergency meetings in boardrooms that had once echoed with smug laughter and false bravado. Charles Whitmore, the self-appointed emperor of elitist marksmanship, was unceremoniously voted out by his own board. No gold watch, no farewell party, just a cold termination and a final walk past the very walls he once lorded over. In his place rose Colonel Laura Bennett, a seasoned combat veteran with a steel jaw, no patience for games, and a war chest of credibility. Her first order of business? Burn the old rules to the ground. Sterling Arms Elite was no more. Under her command, it was reborn as Liberty Range. And with that change came the doors, flung open to veterans, EMTs, nurses, teachers, and public servants. No velvet rope, no need for a pedigree or a trust fund. Just show up, train, and be respected. And where was Elena Ramirez while the media swarmed the gates, hungry for another viral headline? Not in the spotlight. Not doing interviews or holding press conferences. No, she was back at the hospital, quiet, focused, and unbothered. Because for her, justice didn't mean revenge. It meant restoration, dignity, letting the system correct itself while she continued saving lives without seeking applause. But fate wasn't done writing her name into legend. 2 weeks later, during a typical late-night shift in the ER, she looked up from a chart and froze. Standing in front of her, bruised, humbled, and stripped of every ounce of smugness, was Ivan Novak. No sunglasses, no ego, no swagger. Just a man who had once mocked her in public, now standing alone under fluorescent lights with a quiet look of regret. "I was wrong," he said, voice low. "Teach me." And that was the moment everything changed, not because of what he asked, but because of what he carried. Tucked under his arm was a file folder, government seal, classified markings. Elena, ever the professional, nodded and led him to a quiet corner. He slid the file over and whispered, "It's about Charles. He's not done. And he wasn't just running a gun club. He was moving something, offshore." Her fingers tightened on the folder. Pages flipped open to surveillance photos, coded shipping manifests, and a handwritten list of names. One of them was hers. The twist? Novak wasn't just seeking redemption. He was blowing the whistle. And Charles Whitmore? He had just vanished from U.S. jurisdiction 2 days ago. No flight plan, no customs record, just gone. If this part of the story hit you deep, if you felt the justice, the tension, the truth, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because what comes next isn't just about pride or property. It's about uncovering a network of corruption tied to weapons, power, and betrayal at the highest levels. And Elena Ramirez, the humble nurse once mocked for showing up in scrubs, may be the only one with the skills and the courage to expose. Usin, turn on the bell and set it to all, because in the next episode we're following the Phantom Viper into enemy territory. And she's not coming quietly. Elena didn't agree to train Ivan Novak out of pride or for payback. She agreed because she understood something that Charles Whitmore and his entire clique never could. Real power doesn't show off. It doesn't need fancy gear or loud talk or velvet ropes. Real power is quiet. It's the nurse who's pulled a double shift and still finds time to help a kid smile. It's the veteran who stands last in line and tips his cap without saying a word. It's the woman who gets mocked, doubted, and laughed at, and still lines up, breathes in, and makes the impossible shot. Elena stepped into her new role as Liberty Range's lead firearms consultant, not with a bang, but with grace. She didn't just teach shooting drills or safety protocols. She taught people how to carry themselves under pressure, how to stay composed when the room turns on you, how to face disrespect with focus, not fury. Veterans looked to her with gratitude. Nurses who once felt invisible started showing up in uniform. Fathers brought their daughters, hoping they'd learn not just how to shoot, but how to stand tall. Slowly, a new legacy grew out of the ashes of humiliation, one built not on exclusion and elitism, but on courage, humility, and grit. And just when you thought Charles Whitmore couldn't sink lower, he filed a lawsuit, claimed Elena defamed him, claimed her performance ruined his reputation and business interests. He walked into court wearing a $5,000 suit and a smirk like he'd already won. But the judge wasn't impressed. He asked for evidence, and Elena's team rolled out the footage. Every second of it. From Charles's smug bet to the way he mocked her in front of witnesses to the shot that silenced the room. It took 5 minutes, just 5, for the judge to toss the case out with prejudice. And in those 5 minutes, Charles lost the last shred of credibility he ever had. The courtroom broke into applause. Reporters chased Elena as she exited, but she just smiled and waved, declining interviews and simply saying, "I have patience waiting." She didn't just win in the eyes of the public, she won in the eyes of the law, of history, and in the heart of every person who's ever been underestimated because of how they looked, where they came from, or what uniform they wore. And that's the beauty of it. Because Elena never shouted, never fought dirty. She let the truth speak for her. And now every time someone's told they don't belong, they remember her story. They remember the woman who walked into a lion's den with a backpack and a calm smile, and walked out with respect, justice, and an entire movement behind her. So if you're still watching, brother, and you've ever been talked down to, looked past, or pushed aside, let this be your reminder. Don't get even. Get better. Let your actions write the ending they never saw coming. And if this story hit you in the gut like it did me, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because Charles Whitmore? Yeah, he's not done. Turns out the man who lost everything is planning something overseas. And this time, he's not just after reputation. He's after revenge. Elena's next move might not just be about teaching peace. It might be about stopping a man who's willing to burn it all down. Stay tuned. If that story fired you up, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to all so you never miss what happens next. Because this isn't the end when it's just the beginning. Justice is only one shot away.